This is arguably the most heavily litigated event in modern American history. Every claim below is drawn from the Warren Commission report, the HSCA's 1979 findings, the 1980 National Academy of Sciences Review, the 1992 JFK Records Act, and 2025 National Archives releases and reporting. Part 1. Dallas, November 22, 1963. At 12:30 p.m., President John F. Kennedy was riding in an open-top motorcade through Dealey Plaza in downtown Dallas, seated beside Texas Governor John Connally and First Lady Jacqueline Kennedy, when shots rang out. Kennedy was struck twice, in the back neck and fatally in the head. Connally was also seriously wounded. Amateur filmmaker Abraham Zapruder captured the entire sequence on 8mm film, producing what remains the single most scrutinized piece of visual evidence in American history. Kennedy was rushed to Parkland Memorial Hospital and pronounced dead at 1:00 p.m. Within the hour, Vice President Lyndon B. Johnson was sworn in as president aboard Air Force One at Dallas Love Field. Part 2. OSWLD. Investigators quickly focused on Lee Harvey Oswald, a 24-year-old former U.S. Marine working at the Texas School Book Depository, the building overlooking the plaza. Oswald had a striking background. He defected to the Soviet Union in 1959, lived in Minsk, married a Russian woman named Marina, and returned to the U.S. with his family in 1962. In September 1963, just 2 months before the assassination, he traveled to Mexico City and made contact with both the Soviet and Cuban embassies, a trip the CIA was actively monitoring at the time, though this surveillance was later found to have been withheld, in part, from the Warren Commission's investigators. About 45 minutes after the shooting, Oswald shot and killed Dallas police officer J.D. Tippit on a nearby street, then fled into the Texas Theater where he was arrested. He denied shooting the president, telling reporters he was just a patsy. 2 days later, on November 24, while being transferred between jails, Oswald was shot and killed on live national television by Dallas nightclub owner Jack Ruby in the basement of Dallas Police Headquarters, one of the first murders ever broadcast live. Part 3. The Warren Commission, 1964. President Johnson established the Warren Commission, chaired by Chief Justice Earl Warren, to investigate. After 10 months of testimony from more than 550 witnesses and review of thousands of FBI and Secret Service reports, the Commission's September 1964 report concluded that Oswald, acting alone and without advice or assistance, fired all the shots that killed Kennedy and wounded Connally, and that Ruby had also acted alone in killing Oswald. The Commission found no evidence of any domestic or foreign conspiracy. The report's most contested element was the single bullet theory, the finding that one bullet passed through Kennedy's neck and then caused all of Connally's wounds, which was necessary to explain the shooting given the number of shots fired in the available time frame. This theory faced immediate skepticism and remains debated by researchers today. Because parts of the Commission's investigation and records were conducted or sealed in secrecy, and because public confidence was already shaken by the assassination itself, the Warren Report never fully settled public opinion. 1966 author Mark Lane's best-selling critique, Rush to Judgment, helped fuel a growing conspiracy research movement that has never fully faded. Part 4. The HSCA Reversal and the Part Most RETLLINGS Get Wrong 1976-1979. In response to sustained public distrust, amplified by the Church Committee's mid-1970s revelations about CIA and FBI abuses, Congress created the House Select Committee on Assassinations, HSCA, to reinvestigate both the JFK and MLK assassinations. Most retellings stop here and say, the government later admitted it was a conspiracy. That's true, but incomplete, and the missing context matters. In 1978, late in its investigation, the HSCA was presented with a dictable audio recording, believed to be an open police motorcycle microphone that had picked up the sounds of the shooting, and acoustic experts testified it showed a 95% plus probability of a fourth shot fired from the direction of the grassy knoll, implying a second gunman. On the strength of this evidence, the HSCA's final 1979 report concluded Kennedy was probably assassinated as a result of a conspiracy, while still finding Oswald had fired the fatal shots. Part 5. The Acoustic Evidence UNRAVLS. This is the detail almost never included in popular retellings of "the government changed its conclusion." In 1980, the year after the HSCA's report, the National Academy of Sciences, NAS, conducted its own independent review of the same dictable recording at the Justice Department's request, and concluded the recorded sound impulses were not caused by gunfire at all. Subsequent research compounded the problem. Investigators discovered the recording's timeline had been miscalculated, meaning the sounds the HSCA's experts analyzed actually occurred about a minute after the shooting had already ended. In March 1988, the Justice Department formally reported to Congress that it had reviewed both the HSCA's findings and the NAS study, and rejected the HSCA's probable conspiracy conclusion. Later independent research, including a 2001 study and further acoustic analysis published in 2013, went further still, finding the police motorcycle believed to have recorded the sounds likely wasn't even in Dealey Plaza at the time of the shooting. In plain terms, the single piece of evidence that caused the U.S. government to officially reverse course from lone gunman to probable conspiracy was later examined by independent scientists and found to be unreliable, and that correction has never received anywhere near the public attention the original 1979 conspiracy finding did. Part 6. Declassification 1992–2025. Oliver Stone's 1991 film, JFK, reignited public demand for full transparency, leading Congress to pass the President John F. Kennedy Assassination Records Collection Act of 1992, mandating that all assassination-related records be released by 2017, with narrow national security exceptions. Records trickled out over the following decades, including a batch of over 13,000 documents released under President Biden in December 2022. On January 23, 2025, President Trump signed Executive Order 14,176, mandating full declassification of all remaining JFK, RFK, and MLK assassination records. On March 18, 2025, the National Archives released more than 80,000 pages in what officials called one of the largest single record releases in U.S. history, with additional batches following. By that point, roughly 99% of the JFK collection had already been public, leaving fewer than 5,000 documents still withheld before this release. What did the newly released files actually show? According to historians who reviewed them, including Harvard's Frederick Lojval, the documents added significant new texture, greater detail on the extent of CIA surveillance of Oswald's Mexico City trip, on the agency's broader Cold War-era covert operations, and on internal government panic and damage control in the assassination's aftermath. But multiple major outlets and historians who reviewed the release, including the New York Times, NPR, and Northeastern University's Edward Miller, reported the files contained no bombshell evidence overturning the finding that Oswald acted alone as the shooter. What historians actually get wrong. Myth 1. The government eventually admitted there was a conspiracy, and that's the current official conclusion. This is the single most common misunderstanding, and it runs backward from what most people assume. Yes, the HSCA formally concluded in 1979 that a conspiracy was probable, But that conclusion rested specifically on acoustic evidence that independent scientific review subsequently found unreliable, based on a corrected timeline showing the recorded sounds occurred roughly a minute after the actual shooting. The Justice Department formally rejected the HSCA's conspiracy conclusion in 1988. The idea that even the government now says it was a conspiracy is treating a since-discredited 1979 finding as though it still stands, when the scientific basis for it collapsed years later. Myth 2. The Warren Commission was completely vindicated and trustworthy from the start. The opposite oversimplification is equally wrong. The Warren Commission conducted significant portions of its work in secrecy and sealed many records for decades, a decision that, regardless of intent, damaged public trust for a generation. More seriously, the CIA is documented to have withheld information from the Commission about its own surveillance of and interest in Oswald, including his contacts in Mexico City, meaning the Commission reached its conclusions without full access to everything the government itself knew. Distrust of the process was, and is, reasonable, even though the core finding that Oswald fired the fatal shots has held up. Myth 3. The 2025 file release finally proved what really happened. It didn't. Historians and major news organizations who reviewed the roughly 80,000-plus newly released pages found richer detail about CIA operations and Cold War context, but no new evidence overturning the finding that Oswald was the shooter, and no confirmed proof of a broader conspiracy. 60-plus years and millions of pages later, the documentary record still hasn't produced the kind of decisive, case-closing bombshell popular culture keeps expecting. Myth 4. Now that almost everything is declassified, the public debate should be settled. It won't be, and understanding why is itself instructive. Polling has consistently shown a majority of Americans have doubted the lone gunman conclusion for decades, a skepticism rooted as much in the government's early secrecy, the CIA's documented withholding of information, and dramatized pop culture retellings like Stone's JFK, as in any specific piece of unreleased evidence. Full declassification addresses the paper record. It doesn't necessarily address the trust that eroded in 1964 and never fully recovered.